This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Heart Mojo with Melinda Smith. And Melinda, I know you've been busy,
I have.
lots of changes in your life, but it's great that you are back on, and we are going to go forward with some great podcasts.
Right. Well, it's been a month and a half since I put out a podcast. I think Kim was my last guest, and now she's my first guest for the fourth time coming on my podcast, and I really appreciate it. I've moved. I've had a recent diagnosis of Parkinson's. I have already shared that on my social media platform, so I have no problem sharing it here. And in the future, I'm sure we will be doing some podcasts related to that particular illness. But I guess the science of happiness and resilience right now is extra special to me, pushing through this and this new diagnosis. So, but we're not going to concentrate on me. That's not what this is about. It's about helping other people and how they can, still feel happy and get their happiness back with this pandemic and all the craziness that's been going on. So, Kim,
Yes.
you're on, girlfriend.
All right. Well, I'm a little bit of a research wonk, so I'm going to start with a little bit on myths of happiness and what the research tells us constitutes real happiness, and it's not always what we think. So, first of all, we live in the United States, and so here a phrase, the pursuit of happiness, is really big. And yet, we have like 40 some years of research now on happiness and happiness related topics like hope and optimism and resilience and so on. And one of the things that is pretty indisputable is that pursuing happiness is not the path to happiness. So
Mm-hmm.
when you chase it, it's harder to come by than if you do certain things that we'll talk about that increase your resilience and your likelihood of happiness. And then happiness comes alongside of it. And I just want to say quickly that one of the reasons this is so maybe little known is that we live in a consumer culture, which sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
forget not every culture is like ours. And it didn't take long after the rise of advertising and so on for people to figure out that if you can make people feel inadequate or sad or fearful or something, it's a whole lot easier to sell them a product. So, just not to step on anybody's toes as wedding season approaches, because I loved my wedding too. So, I'm not criticizing weddings, but I'm also a middle aged lady. And I remember the olden days when you got married. You did your own makeup, you often did your own hair. You didn't have to have your teeth whitened. You didn't have to have your nails done. Now there's like a million hoops that you're, quote,
Mm-hmm.
air quotes, supposed to jump through. All of them cost money. Some of them cost money that many brides and grooms, especially young ones, can't afford.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow they've come to believe this myth of happiness that if you don't do all the stuff, then you don't have, quotes, your perfect day. And
Right.
that's just an example of how we've been sold a bill of goods. So if our readers are really, our readers, listen to me, I'm a teacher, can you tell? If our listeners are really interested in learning more about this, there's a book called The Myths of Happiness by Dr. Sonia, Sonja, I think. And her last name's Lubomirsky. So just remember LY, Sonia LY, The Myths of Happiness, and it'll come right up when you search it. And it's so good because she unpacks like why we think what we think and how sometimes it's not right. So if that's not right, if we're all caught in this loop of when the pandemic's over, then I'll be happy. If I can lose 10 pounds, then I'll be happy. I married you. I can't be happy till you're gone. I had kids. I can't be happy till they move out. People are often putting their happiness in the future. But instead, what the research shows is that there's two components to happiness. And one is feelings of happiness. And that's something we all know and love and sometimes are tempted to chase. The other one is thoughts of satisfaction. And that's so important. I'm going to say it again, thoughts of satisfaction. So the pandemic, I think, and all that people have been through, not only illnesses and deaths, but jobs and financial setbacks and home losses and worrying about their kids and kids at home. And I mean, it's been the whole 9 yards, right? Sometimes I lift my head and I say, what the heck just happened? What did we just go through? But there weren't a lot of feelings of happiness, although people did a masterful job coming forward with humor and crazy
Mhm.
memes online and, Zoom events that were silly. And I just spoke with somebody who works with the aged, and they were having line dancing outside the windows. They would move all
That
around the
would be
fort.
us.
That's
That would
You
her.
be
did
me.
that?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
oh,
the group you came to
yeah,
speak.
that I totally forgot. That's where I heard that story, but you can tell it impressed me because I'm still talking about. Were you one of the dancers, Melinda?
Oh yeah, I'm one of I'm the line leader
Oh, I
actually.
love it. And weren't you like going around to all the different windows so people could
Yeah, we
see
go
it?
to the windows, the seniors come. Some of them can come outside now with distance, of course,
Yeah.
or just inside. But yeah, they come right up to the windows. We sing, we dance. They're awesome. And they
Okay,
sing and
so
dance too.
it's a perfect example of not following the myths of happiness that, to be happy, you have to buy the next new thing or you got to have status or influence. These are simple pleasures. So I think one of the
Mhm.
things that came out of the pandemic that made people kind of sit up and take notice was that simple pleasures are great pleasures. Playing a
Right.
game, playing cards,
Music,
um,
music,
music.
music made a whole difference for these people.
Right.
Exactly. So, okay. And then the second thing, so those were feelings of happiness. So 1.1 is even when the caca has totally hit the fan, all right, you can still have feelings of happiness.
Hmm.
Even when a loved one has died and you're very sad, you can still laugh. They're not
Right.
mutually exclusive. Then the second thing is, I think during the pandemic, I wish more people had realized that another form of happiness is thoughts of satisfaction. Because if you were helping to school your kids at home and trying to hold down a job at the same time, you may not have been having excessive feelings of happiness. But when you put your head on the pillow at night and you could say, I really did my job today, I held it together 80% of the time, those are powerful thoughts of satisfaction, which we can learn to be grateful for and to derive joy from. So, joy is a quieter kind of happiness. It's not like
Hmm.
yippee and balloons and releasing pigeons and stuff, but it's a deeper, quieter kind of happiness that sometimes our culture underestimates.
I think that's one of the things that I get out of doing this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making money at this podcast. It's not like I'm some famous person and all of that. I'm
Right.
just an average Jane in Cleveland, Ohio, who wants to help people. And
Right.
when I hear somebody say to me, oh my gosh, I really liked your podcast, or thank you for putting that out there. I got a lot of good information. It really helped me. That gives me joy.
Right. Me
That's
too.
why
I
I
mean,
did
that's
it.
why I'm here. Of course, I'm going to send you a huge bill for this. No.
Oh my. I wonder
Uh-oh.
who's going to pay that bill.
I know.
But Kim, some of the things that you were saying, I'm hoping those feelings of happiness and satisfaction don't go away as we move out of some of the restrictions that we've had.
Yes.
Um, I know that um, I've learned to be a little less critical of my
Yes.
family and of myself. If
Yes.
I can't do something, I'm now willing to say, I can't do it or I can't do it now.
Right.
And I'll tell you, that makes a whole
Mhm.
big difference in my life that
Yes.
I'm not walking around feeling guilty.
Yeah. And not only that, let me offer that me too. I actually, when the pandemic started and my spirits really sank, I immediately hired a coach to teach me some mindful self compassion. I mean, I knew about mindful self compassion, but knowing how to do it and actually doing it and having an accountability partner are two different things. Because, like you, I'm like, I should be able to go through this pandemic with no down days. And I'm gonna clean out all the closets and make headway on my book. And, sometimes that happened, sometimes it didn't. So we all had days.
Mhm.
As one really funny commentator on the internet, which was my humor salvation, said, one day I'm down cleaning the baseboard with a Q-tip. And the next day I'm watching Hallmark movies all day.
Yeah.
And like, how do I explain this?
And eating, which so
Right.
many people did, that gave them their happiness for the day.
Exactly. You know,
Keep
I mean,
themselves
let's face it,
happy.
it's a challenge. It's still a challenge, you know. But I think right alongside what you just said, Karen, is us realizing that we can make choices, because another thing that the happiness research shows is that some of it is inborn. So the nature nurture question has been looked at very closely. A lot of those studies have been done with identical twins, and it's amazing how identical twins, even those raised apart, you know, so they were
Mhm.
given up for adoption or something, and they were raised apart, and then the researchers track them down as adults, and they have shockingly similar levels of easiness at
Right.
laughing and comfort and, you know, silliness and so on. One pair of twins in their 60s was nicknamed the giggle twins by the researchers because they didn't even know each other until they were in their 30s, I think, but they would laugh at all the same stuff, you know. So there's pretty clear that there is definitely a genetic component. Some people are just a little leaning more towards serious and so on, but that's only a component. Other components include whatever is happening right now, you know, like
Mhm.
whatever caca has hit the fan, as I say in my sophisticated way. And then also like what you decide about that. So like the way you learn to manage stress, or the way you learn to stop complaining and go for a walk, or the
Mhm.
way you learn to treat yourself to a bubble bath, or jog with a dog, or whatever your things are. Everybody needs kind of a palette of restorative activities that they get off our rumps and move into, engage in, whenever we feel like, you know, we're heading for the
So
pit.
so I can only look at myself and my history. And
Yes,
I've had a lot of craziness starting from a young age, right? But I was blessed to
sure.
have great grandparents and a mom there, not so much on the other side, not the dad side. But I learned to deal with that. And I learned coping mechanisms and to search for the happiness in that moment. What makes the difference, do you think? Is it all genetic? I mean, we were
Oh
raised the
no.
same way, and my brother is not exactly the same type of person I am.
Oh no.
And
Well, you're not even twins, so of
well, we're
course,
not twins, but
a
the
different
idea
genetic
is we were
inheritance.
brought up in the same family. We
Yes.
had similar issues when we were younger, life
Hmm.
changed when we were older, but when we were younger, which is really when you start to develop these things, I think,
Sure.
how you
Right.
handle it. So what
But
are
what's the
the thoughts
difference?
on why one person can handle it, look for the happiness out of
I
it,
love that
feel they're
question.
happy, and the other person does not?
I love that question. And of course, I'm not a therapist, so a therapist might be able to give a better answer to this, but I would say a couple things. I also had a loving family that put the fun in dysfunction. And the older I get, like, which family doesn't? You know, I'm starting to
Really,
think
that's
that
true.
we're. And so when I realized that there were certain glitches in my mental makeup, you know, I went for counseling. And one of the things the counselor said to me is, you know, that because the family was a little wacko, but I want to emphasize very loving, which I'm grateful for. I learned to be kind of vigilant all the time and so on. And but the counselor said, here you are. So tuck that away, like file that away under instinct for health. You had this feeling that you needed help sorting out a piece of pain. And instead of wasting your pain, which sadly some people choose to do,
Mhm.
you're choosing to meet it head on and see what you can do about it. And there is no pain-free life. I mean, that's another myth of
No,
happiness that we get sold,
Right.
right? People think, oh, I'm not happy right now. I must be doing something wrong. No,
right. Well,
no,
and if you don't have unhappiness, if you don't have pain, you don't know the other side,
that's
right?
right. Absolutely. So I would say the difference in people is maybe different genetic makeup, maybe different role models. So if you're in a male female parenting situation, and the dad is very dour and serious and a little angry, and he's the primary role model for a son, that could make a difference, you know,
Hmm.
but it's not destiny. That's the point I want to make. Like, you're never doomed as long as you pursue your own growth. I think in the past we talked about Carol Dweck and her lifelong learning notion.
Hmm.
And I the older I get, the more I think that's one of the big secrets of life, is that you're always willing to take one more try. Well, I actually have a quote here I wanted to share with our group because I love it and I hung it up. It's by Brian Andrews. I hung it up in my kitchen where I see it every day. Anyone can slay a dragon, but try waking up every morning and loving the world all over again. That's what takes a real hero. And so I think the commitment to one's own growth and to expanding your perspective and becoming less judgmental and more compassionate, having that, setting that intention on a regular basis, I think that's a big piece of it.
So,
Deciding to be not bitter but better. I mean, that's a decision.
and that is a decision. And sometimes, working in the senior community, which I do on my day job, right?
Sure.
You have some very angry people. And you and I have
You
talked
do.
about this before in a previous
Yeah.
podcast about generational differences and how you have a whole group of people who are angry about going through the aging process.
Right.
Again, it's a choice. One would think that as you got older, you would learn that, boy, I need to look at this moment as being a good moment versus negative moment. But yet, you still have a whole bunch of people who everything is woe is me. They're the
Right.
Eeyores. This
Right,
is
right.
terrible. My
Right.
life is horrid.
Right.
I don't see where that
But-
benefits
But
anybody.
see,
Like,
gratitude is the thing. Like, you always talk about gratitude.
I do.
Karen and I were just saying, you got this crummy diagnosis. I lost one of my best friends on Mother's Day.
I'm sorry.
So I'm feeling sad right now.
Mhm.
And she was 78. She was a force of nature. I mean, nobody thought she was going to die now because 78 is kind of young these days, right?
Mhm.
But what a life she lived. What a legacy she left. She was just such a generous spirit. So I'm so grateful. At the same time that I'm deeply, deeply sad, she was also my writing partner as well as my friend. I'm so grateful for her life. And she was grateful every day, even as she
Mhm.
was becoming a little more frail. It's just, it's because she would say, I've been a little short of breath lately, but not everybody gets to this age so that they can be short of breath.
Right. That's
Right.
true.
Right? Isn't that a great
It's
attitude?
true.
Kim, when Melinda brought up how seniors tend to feel angry, I think a lot of that is our culture, and we've
I do
seen
too.
it.
Absolutely.
The Hallmark movie is
Yeah.
everything is perfect. No matter what your age is, it's going to be perfect. And
Right.
we've been brought up to believe that. And I remember my grandmother saying to me when I got engaged the first time, the only way to be happy, you make him happy and you'll be happy. And I did that for 7 years. I made him happy. But I kept asking myself, why do
Why
I
am
feel
I
so,
not happy?
why am I unhappy?
Right.
And it didn't take, I didn't learn it right away. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we got divorced. I went on, but it really was within the last 10 years that I finally said, whoa, I don't have to make everybody happy.
Right.
Because if I can make me happy, whether
Right.
it means I go take an extra 5 minutes in the bathroom,
Yeah.
or I take a walk, or I
Yeah.
read a book, if that makes me smile, I'm going to be better for everybody else.
Absolutely. And if we could just look at that example, which is an excellent one, there are several things there that I've been talking about. So for one thing, and I'm sure you said it was your grandma who said this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure she was like a beautiful human being because you are. So I don't doubt that she had much wisdom. But look at the myth there. Make him happy and then you'll be happy. So the man comes first and then the woman comes second. Okay. Don't think about your own like boundaries or needs, or don't think of yourself as too separate a person with different desires and so on. All right. And then that happiness is feelings of happiness. All right. So she didn't have that broader notion that we're trying to educate people into now. And then alongside it, I think what you said about our culture is absolutely true. We need a better wisdom toolkit in our culture around suffering. We want to spend suffering away or laugh it away or, kind of everything's going to be fine, and that's not real life. There's a lot of happiness goes right in hand with knowing how to accept it is what it is.
Mhm.
And I think
It's
that's not being
interesting.
told to the average person.
Right.
It's interesting. When I got this diagnosis, she was talking, the doctor was talking to me, and she said, well, you're taking this really well. I went,
Oh, that's great.
what do you want me to do about it? Like,
Exactly.
there's nothing I can do but try to live as healthy as possible.
Right.
I got to get on with my life. I'm too busy to be sick right now. I'm,
Yes.
I'm moving. I have this job. I'm busy. And
Right.
keeping busy makes me happy. That's one of my
Right.
happiness things, being out and seeing other people and doing things and not thinking about the illness. Now, I do have to learn a little better self-care. I do have
Yes.
to rest a little more frequently and, reduce stress a little bit. But I have those tools in my toolkit. I just have to make sure I take the tools out of the toolkit and use
Yes.
them.
Yes.
Music is one of those things. Dance is one of those things. Walking in nature is one of those things. The water. I made sure that I went to Lake Erie over the weekend. It was beautiful out. Got takeout, got my salad, sat down and had my dinner at the water. Now, it's not
So
the
smart.
ocean for me,
Yeah.
but it's very healing
Right.
Right.
for me. So I think if anybody's listening and they get this, some not good diagnosis or not good news, it's not that you're going to ignore it. It's not just wish it
Right.
away, because it's not always going away,
Right.
but it's taking the perspective and adjusting it, saying, okay, I have this, I'm not ignoring it.
Right.
However, I have a choice of
Right.
letting it knock me down. And it's okay if you fall down occasionally.
Sure.
You just got to get back up and
Right.
look at the happy, look for the happiness that you can take in the moment of that day.
Because this diagnosis is part of your life,
Right. It's
but
not
it's
my
not
whole life.
all of your life.
Mhm.
And that's where the angry aged that we sometimes meet,
Mhm.
they have made their unhappiness their whole life.
Right.
So there's no room for anything else, which is sad. And I think I wish I knew like the exact research on this, but the research on aging shows that over the decades, people generally become more optimistic and more happy. So people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s tend to be happier than people in their 30s, for example.
Mhm.
And that's partly because many, not all, you've been seeing a swath of people who are not doing this,
Right.
but many have learned this too will pass. A bad thing is not forever. I get to decide, how long I'm going to let this make me miserable. That was actually a huge one for me. Like I had to, because I did used to grind away on the badness of things. That was one of the things I learned from my family. It's almost like I don't want to miss out on how bad this is, so I'm gonna grind away on this all I can. And I was in my 30s when I realized I read some book on self-talk or something, and it said it in exactly that way. And I was like, it was like a brick in the head. I was like, oh my God, I do that. So then I decided I was going to give myself like an hour to 2 hours max, if it was something really big, to be miserable. Because being miserable for a day or days isn't going to change anything. How much of my life do I want to give to this thing that feels so terrible?
I look at that now. For instance, I moved, right? And I'm not really thrilled with where I'm at. And it's 13 months I have a lease, right?
Yeah.
And I think, do I really want to I'm spending 13 months of my life, given my diagnosis, here. It's not really where I want to be.
Right.
So I think that, but then there's a part of me going, okay, so I'm going to waste the 13 months being angry about the 13 months being there. So I'm trying to focus on what I do like, which is my beautiful patio that I've set up with my flowers and rocking chair, and I can have a glass of wine and relax at the end of the day.
Right.
So I'm going to focus on that. But I had to have my pity party for a little bit, right?
Yes.
Because I needed to get it out.
Oh, right. That's the thing. We got to feel the feelings. We got to be honest. We got to speak the truth in love. We also have to call ourselves on our own BS. And then say, what can well, here's one of the things that Tal Ben-Shahar, who teaches happiness at Harvard, was the most taken class in the history of Harvard at one point. And he's a wonderful teacher. And if you want to go beyond what we can do here in our limited time, get on YouTube and look up Happiness 101, because that's a PBS program that Tal Ben-Shahar made with Boston PBS, I think. It's terrific. It's so good. It's all research based, but he's this really neat human being who's a husband and a father and, living the same life as the rest of us. Anyway, he said two things that really, he'd said a bunch of things that struck me, but two of them were, don't keep asking yourself, am I happy now? Am I happy now? Because that's the kind of pursuing of happiness that makes you go, I don't know. Okay.
Right.
So like, don't do that. And he also had all kinds of advice on mini, middies, and maxis. So like most of us or cultures like ours think happiness is a vacation. Happiness is winning the
Mhm.
lottery. Where do we get brainwashed into this? I don't know. Our grandparents certainly wouldn't have defined happiness in that way, but
No.
in just a couple generations, all of a sudden, like we want everything. We want the perfect house. We want 3 cars. We want, okay. So that's very maxi. And life is not very maxi. It's much more mini and middy. So he cited research where people had 2 weeks of vacation. A third of them broke it up real small, like they could go home early on Friday or leave, you know, come in late on Monday, and they stretched it over the whole year. And then other people took a week, and then 6 months later took another week, and some of them took 2 weeks at one time. And all of them kept a journal on how happy they were day to day for the whole year. So like a great experiment, right? It's really well designed.
Hmm.
And at the end of the year, which group do you think was the happiest?
The one that did the small bites.
Exactly. So when I had like 3 days in a row where I was like, I'm going to jump from the highest turret, which I'm not trying to make fun of suicide here because it's very serious, but you know what I mean? Sometimes
I
you have to
know.
laugh. You have to laugh at yourself
You
sometimes.
do.
And so I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to help myself? I teach people how to do this. And like, it's the third day. So what did I do? I ordered like little twinkle lights that have like an automatic 8 settings. They blink, they race, they shine continuously. And I hung them up in the bedroom. I can't tell you how that helped me get through the winter. It was
Mhm.
maybe a $10 or $15 investment. It took a half an hour to put them up. I looped them all over the place like they do in the Hallmark movies.
Right.
And when I was feel low, I would come up and give myself permission because I have a very strong tendency to beat myself up. That's what I grew up with, Germans. And I would say, okay, you need a break, or today's not your best day. And one of the quotes I have hanging up for myself is, one of the challenges of life is to become comfortable being uncomfortable as we expand and move into new experiences. And I believe that with every fiber of my being, but I can't always feel it. So I would give myself permission to read a book and put on my lights and maybe
I
have a
love
cup of
that.
tea, creature comforts,
Right.
I
simple
like having
pleasures.
lights outside. See, I would put those out on my patio above me, and that is my intention to do that for the
Yay.
have a fire outside. That's
I,
another
yeah, me
comfort.
too. I went out one night and built one just for myself. In the past, I would do it like when the family was here. And I thought, why do I only have to do it when I count?
And that's the difference when we can start doing things for ourselves and
Right.
not. I mean, last year I was walking at this time every single day, and I haven't started it yet. And this morning I thought to myself, why aren't I walking?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, last year I used to do it with my husband, but
Mm-hmm.
he's working, so I don't have to wait for him. Okay.
Right.
And because of my schedule today, I really couldn't go walking, but it's like, you know what? That's what I need to do for me. Now, every night I exercise, no matter what anybody else says. And there are times there's like, do you have to do that? Yeah, I do,
Yeah.
because it makes me feel better and it makes me sleep better.
My daughter says, always ask future self if it will be glad if present self does this thing.
Oh, that's smart.
Interesting.
It's
She's married to a psychologist. He's a psych professor. And of course, that comes right out of the research. It's hard for us in the moment to like put on our gym clothes
right.
and go do the thing.
Right.
But if we say to ourselves, will future self be really proud of me if I, and if the
I
answer is
go work
yes,
out.
and I can just push myself out the door, and in the same way, that can be a powerful discernment when we're tempted to do something that's not so good for me. So
Right.
how will future self feel if I eat an entire bag of chips?
Even
you
though
know,
you might want them in the moment.
right.
I find that's one thing, that's a discipline that I have developed. I'll buy an ice cream, a cup of ice
Hmm.
cream. I
Yeah.
never eat, I shouldn't say never. I rarely eat the whole thing,
Right.
especially if I'm alone. I'll eat a third of it and then I save it.
Yes.
And there are people in my life who go, what the heck is wrong with you? You just eat the whole thing. It's there.
Right.
But I stretch out that happiness, that moment.
Exactly.
It's the little bites of happiness. And I think that I'm
Exactly.
hoping that out of this, we get the message. People get the
Me
message, those
too.
little bites, taking the walk, being under the lights in your room, reading the book. Those little bites of happiness lend to your quality of life every
Yeah.
day
That was my
versus
prayer every day.
the big.
Please, whoever is the, like I don't presume that all our listeners are believers, but whatever the more is, whatever the great wisdom with a capital W is, be with us so that we come out of this suffering enlarged in spirit,
Mhm.
and not diminished.
Well, what I'd like to suggest is that not next month. Let's build this up a little bit. How about in July? We actually open this up and we put out the link, and anybody who wants to join us can join us.
Oh, that
Should
would
we
be
do a
fun.
live
And
podcast?
That would be
do
really
an
fun.
absolute live podcast and let's talk about these things.
Well, July is my birthday month. It's a big birthday.
Woohoo!
So that's a good month to do that.
That
That'll
would
be
And
be
it would
happy
be
birthday,
great to
Melinda.
hear other people's wisdom. Like, what have
Right.
you learned? What worked for you?
absolutely.
Do we have a minute for me to throw out a couple other resources, or are we
Sure.
out of time?
Go
Sure.
right ahead.
Okay, so if you want to learn more, because it's all baby steps, a blog that I follow that I really like, I don't get any money for saying this or anything, is called Barking Up the Wrong Tree. It's by award-winning writer Eric Barker. And what he does is take positive psychology, the kind of research we've been talking about here tonight, and he puts it into regular words for us average Janes and Joes. And he's funny. He's terrific. And he has a book by the same title, Barking Up the Wrong Tree. And the other thing I did that helped me a lot during the pandemic was I took my social media, whatever you follow, and I made like a see first kind of position for things that would lift me up. So
Mhm.
for me, that was stuff like the Greater Good Science Center, which gives you all these tips on how to live a more satisfying life, and they're all research based and actionable. Or I also follow like the Greater Om, I think, is one. I mean, I'm not a Buddhist, but there's a lot of wisdom on it. I follow one on Celtic spirituality. I follow a whole bunch of happiness pages because they have great quotes, great tips, occasional wonderful study. And so in tiny little bites, you over the years are starting to expand your repertoire of how to help yourself and
Right.
others, how to set good boundaries, how to have, deal with difficult people. These kinds of sites tackle all those pinch points in
Right.
daily life, and little by
Right.
little we become more skilled. So
Kim, send me those in an
sure,
email and then I'll post those beneath this so
that
that
would be my
people can
pleasure.
find it. That would be great.
Yeah.
Well, once again, thank you. I'm blessed to have you on the show and grateful.
Me
And
too.
some dog out there is happy too, because you can hear him barking. I have the
Yeah.
window open.
Well, aren't they our teachers? My grand dog is one of my best spiritual teachers.
True that. They know what happiness means.
They do.
Absolutely.
So hopefully, we'll put that together. Karen and I will put that discussion group together, and we can do that in July. And thank you once again for being on.
It's my pleasure.
So happy.
I love your audience, and it feels good to stay in touch with them and with both of you good women.
Well,
Thanks
you
for
help
having
create
me.
my happiness for the day.
Yeah,
well,
thank you.
everybody stay happy. Find that little thing that really triggers.
All right, take that little
happiness.
bite.
And don't forget thoughts of satisfaction. It doesn't all have to be yippee, yippee, yippee. It can also be, dang, I'm good.
I love it. Have a great day,
Thanks.
everybody.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.